Tonight, corruption watch, and again, our partners have uncovered some serious allegations of corruption amounting to some 5 million Ghana cedis at the Zongo Development Fund. And we're going to break this down for you and get to do some analysis and get some reaction to this. Fascinating stuff. Let's go through this. Let's get started with the very fundamental. Now, the investigations has uncovered that the Zongo Development Fund has engaged in alleged procurement malpractices in the purchase of goods, services, and work worth more than 5 million cedis. This is a breakdown of what they found. Now, management of the Zongo Development Fund allegedly superintended the procurement breaches such as inflation of contract figures and breaching of entity heads threshold. We're going to go into the specific and the numbers involved in what corruption was found. They established that 200,000 cedis of the 5 million cedis that they have uncovered was spent on contract for COVID-19 PPEs, right? And this was done at the time, of course, when COVID-19 appeared to be at this peak locally and pretty much rushed through at the Zongo Development Fund. In addition, the fund was alleged to have spent more than 4.8 million to procure office cabinet, ICT equipment, and accessories, recruit contractors for the installation of street lights and drilling of mechanized boreholes, right? It's about accountability. Now, also the engagement of consultants for various services amounting to what? 4.8 million. Now, it's not that they did this, but it's how they did it and the allegations of inflation of these costs that Corruption Watch was flagging. Now, the Corruption Watch investigators say that the chief executive officer, by the way, of the fund, Arafat Suleiman Abdullahi, conceded in an interview that they did with him, because you need to follow up on this, try and get his side of the story with Corruption Watch, quote, that he went beyond his threshold. This is an admission that he went beyond his threshold in the approval of the 200,000 contract for COVID-19 PPE. Now, listen to the man himself when he interacted with the Corruption Watch officials and investigators.
I said I went beyond my threshold. You are not comfortable with mine, and you are trying to paraphrase and make it look like I'm a lawbreaker. That's how I see it.
So you prefer to say you went beyond your threshold?
That is what I said. Okay.
So that is the man himself admitting that, yes, I said I went beyond my threshold, but that is not what the law says. The law is absolutely categorical on this particular matter. Now, Suleiman Abdullahi, as the head of the entity, of the fund, that is the Zongo Development Fund, per the Public Procurement Amendment Act 2016. This is why it's an issue, because of the law that says you can't do this. It's only permitted to approve procurements that are worth 100,000 cedis and below. 100,000 cedis and below. Nothing more, nothing less. If you head beyond that, you cannot approve that. So how did he come to approve 200,000 cedis out of 5 million without even getting the procurement authority's approval, right? Now, Suleiman was appointed, and this is just a background to who he is, by the way. He was appointed in 2019 as a CEO, and some antecedents, by the way. The procurement of the COVID-19 related items, namely bottles of sanitizer, bottles of liquid soap, bundles of nose masks, is of course one of the mega transactions he has overseen since his appointment in 2019. This is the biggest he's done, one of the biggest he's done so far. And of course, flags are already being raised about this. Now, the contract was awarded to Focus Women Network. And this was done on the 25th of March 2020. And remember, that was a time when Ghana was now bracing up for the COVID-19. We were trying to get used to it and trying to find a way to deal with it. It was pretty chaotic around that time, if you remember. And the award was for 200,000, after which Suleimana Abdullahi now wrote, after they've awarded a contract, wrote to the Public Procurement Authority, which, by the way, that's not what the law says. You should do it before, get the approval of the PPA, especially when you're exceeding your threshold. He wrote to them afterwards to request for ratification of the contract. Why? Because he had breached, and he himself acknowledges this, breached his permissible threshold as head of the entity. You break the law, and then you now try to fix it after the fact. Now, according to the Corruption Watch, Suleimana sidestepped the Zongo Development Fund's entity tender committee, the internal tender committee that was supposed to do this, in the award of the contract, even though the transaction was beyond the permissible threshold of the head of entity. You have your own entity tender committee, went beyond it, ignored the tender entity committee, even when you knew that you were exceeding that threshold. This is exactly what they found. Now, again, why is this an issue? Because if you go to Section 8 of the law that governs the fund, of the procurement law, by the way, it stipulates that the head of the entity shall refer to the entity tender committee for approval a procurement above the approval threshold of the head committee. In other words, if any time you go above it, the law says you need to refer this to the procurement authority for it to look at and approve. Now, according to the Corruption Watch, the transaction raised eyebrows because of the manner in which the contract was executed. They alleged that the purchase, which was not pre-planned at all, started off under the price quotation method, and this is all very interesting way of making a process that was supposed to be pretty simple if you go to the process a bit more complicated of procurement, but eventually ended up as a single source contract. Remember, that was supply of PPE, face masks, bottles of sanitizers that many people could supply at that time, but they had to do single source for this. Now, according to the Corruption Watch, Mr. Suleimana then confirmed in an interview with 11 others, and this is where they had also approached him, right? And he brought in 11 others that, to sit in this particular meeting, that he hasn't really breached the permissible threshold, knowing it, wrote to the PPA for ratification, right? I mean, this is himself admitting to this. So listen to that particular conversation he had with the Corruption Watch officials.
By the rule, this falls under goods and services. That's why, when I was mentioning projects, then I came to goods, where I mentioned lights and other things. And I also mentioned nobody knew we were going to procure this. It wasn't part of that. So when the need came for us to procure sanitizers, and because the Zongo people needed it, and the purpose of our establishment is to address the needs of. And at that time, it was so crucial, a time that if you give somebody a sanitizer, you save a soul. In fact, I overlooked my capacity for goods procurement. It's 100,000. I said no. The Zongo people need more than 100,000. PPA was closed. They were not working. If you need them, I think they say come at 2 o'clock to meet some skeletal stuff. It was just manic. And looking at what my people needed, my client group needed, I was prepared to go over the threshold, which was 100,000, and I went further to do. I doubled that. Then later I'll go to PPA and say, Master, I beg. Here I knew I was wrong, but this is the reason. So I went beyond the 100 and did 200, which I knew from the one that I was doing, because I put the interest of my client group first, rather than what to some extent the process was, which is something I wouldn't want to do again, but given the circumstances around it, they needed more than what. So we went ahead. So I went ahead and said, well, let's do 200. But if you do that, it's like, that is not the end of it. You have to make sure that you do the right thing. So the letter to PPA was to tell them that, yes, prodigal son. I went beyond what you have prescribed. I've now come. Accept me as your lovely son again. I know it was wrong, but I want to go through the right process now. And indeed, after that, I don't know whether you've got the question, the letter that came as well. The letter that came from PPA. Have you got it? They came back and said, fine, we've received your letter.
I'll be happy to see it.
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, then, but that is not, we understand your explanation, but that is not. We are going to commence an investigation to find out exactly what went wrong, for you not to stick to what you know is the law. And I think 2 of their guys have come here. Yeah, they came here, PPA guys, to invite series of questions. Yours, Master, go to no questions. Why didn't you? Did you try that? Did you do it? And we explained the process to them. When the quotations came, we didn't stop there. We took it to FDA. We went to FDA to make sure that we are providing the right stuff. So we went to FDA, and they told us that the quality of this one is better than that of Casapreco. The quality of that one, that is fit for a 5-star hotel. This is what they told us. But that was just by the side of it. They didn't put it on there. And they pleaded with us, please, what we are asking you, for the quality that you presented to us, please never change it. If you keep the quality, you can export this material. That is what. So when they didn't know that, so when they came and we showed everything to them, they said, well, they won't make pronouncement there and then. But at least they could see that. But for me going beyond the 100, I ticked all the boxes in the green section, except the 100,000, which is more or less not even red like amber, but they will get back to me. I think they haven't come back yet. So they are investigating why I went beyond 100 and did 200. So that investigation is still ongoing. And that letter, yes, I wrote, I said, please, forgive me, I did the wrong thing, regularize it for me. So that one, I remember I did it.
You had an entity tender committee at the time you were preparing this, right? And yet you did not submit an evaluation report to the entity tender committee to regularize the procurement. But then you wrote to PPA to validate it. I don't understand.
That is
because the go-to point, the first point of call should be your ETC, because 200,000 is within the threshold of the entity tender committee. And of course, you are the head of the entity tender committee.
That's correct.
Right. So why didn't you put this before the entity tender committee instead of going straight to PPA?
And that is another question altogether. That does not follow. I can explain that if that is what you want to ask, and I will explain.
Yes, kindly.
No.
When will you explain that?
Ask the right way. Please, I will answer. I don't think we are presuming that going to PPA was wrong.
I'm saying,
I didn't go there.
What I understand under the law, if a transaction is beyond the threshold of the entity, it goes to the entity tender committee. When it is within the entity tender committee's threshold, why wasn't the entity tender committee your first point of call?
If you want, because I came here not to answer these questions.
From the answer he gave to you earlier, he told you that the contract he was approving for the supply of sanitizers. Before we realized he had gone beyond the threshold. At the time he was through, and he said he was not given to only one supplier. Are you getting it? So it will be, if you have to provide, that's what I'm saying, that let us provide, if you want the information, let us provide information to see whether this particular 200,000 was just what for the amount that was approved on a single day, or it was approved in series. You can give that gave you up to the 200,000. If you want those information, we can provide those information. It was not just that he was awarding a contract of 200,000 and overlooked the entity committee. The fact of the matter is that as he was approving, and you know the circumstances under which this issue was being handled.
As much as possible, I've decided to avoid it.
Under such circumstances, he was approving them in piecemeal. And when you realize, before the figure had exceeded the 100,000.
No, when you say he was approving, because he has raised the thing about approving in piecemeal.
Very interesting conversations there between himself and other executives of the Zongo Development Fund, and of course investigators from Corruption Watch. It contains a lot of admissions, as you heard him there say, yeah, I mean, I did it, and I'm sorry. Can you regularize it? It's instructive to try and find out what the public procurement authority's reaction was to him attempting to fix a problem. I mean, this wasn't just a mere problem. This was a breach of a law that came with sanctions. Did the public procurement authority flag this and recommend the appropriate sanctions to be placed, or they also sort of just complied with, yeah, you broke the law. The man says, I admitted I break the law, but we will regularize it for you. Is that even allowed under the law? We'll interrogate that shortly, because the conversation into the background to this and the other things that we haven't told you yet will come forward after this, because there is more. In fact, Corruption Watch has also uncovered that auditors are also on the trail of the chief executive of the Zongo Development Fund. We've been talking about 200,000 cedis, but there's 4.8 million that was also spent. The auditors have also raised preliminary questions and concerns about possible abuse of these funds, the 4.8 million, in the purchase of ICT equipment, including also procurement of office cabinet, the issue about engaging consultants and how that money was used. The auditors had raised queries on this already with him. The Corruption Watch investigators put these initial findings to him directly in this encounter that they had with him. Listen to what he said.
When I came in, the cabinet had been procured, obviously by my predecessor. God bless his soul, Alhaji Mohammed Baba Al-Hassan. But I think they say it will be a kind of borderline responsibility for me. I'm not there, so I can't respond. That one. And as you rightly said, I don't think, to be fair to you, I don't think this is the first time I'm seeing this. I don't know whether, I think even the external auditor's report, I don't know, it has come up before. No, internal auditor has also. And as I speak to you, and that is one of the reasons why I didn't even want to come in. The external auditors are here. Finding out how far we've gone with all this. They've been here they just returned from a visit to all our projects across the country. They spent over 2 weeks. They've come back. This and many other. And of course, including what you saw on the back there. That's what I wanted you to see, not for any reason. That we are not oblivious of it. Some of them, you look at it, you can't clap hands for it. You know, what is not good is not good. And they've raised it appropriately, so we are happy to work with them to see. And I've also told you that we can't sit here and say we are 100%. But the point is, happening at a time when I was not there, and asking me to respond to, I can only say that, to be fair to the blessed soul, and knowing what I know now, he did what he was supposed to do. And we have also copied, looked at what he did at the time, and we have factored it into our response, because they asked us to respond to it. External auditors last year, they were here January to June. I was not in the country. But accountant, finance, they've addressed these questions and ready for inspection by the external auditors. So as I'm talking to you, boss, internal auditors are on our neck to provide something by today. External auditors are on our neck to provide status implementation of what we have there. And we have Frederick Asiama also bombarding us with questions relating to all things. In fact, we are under a series of scrutiny, kind of internal audit, external audit. This is the deadline. And in fact, the first thing I should have even told you that if auditors are around asking us to do anything, we don't speak to people about what we ask to even talk about.
Do you have a procurement plan?
Oh, we do.
You do?
We do. That one I can answer that.
When was it approved? For 2020?
We have a procurement plan.
For 2020?
Yes, we do.
When was it approved, sir?
We have a procurement plan. I don't have the date off the top of my head. I can provide that later.
But you have an idea of the month?
We have a procurement plan. I have a month date. I can provide that later, boss. Besides, it's one of the issues here which the guys have said we should stick to the procurement, the status of implementation. We will update that, and boss, you'll get it. Note it down. That I say when we finish with our auditors. It's one of them.
When are you finishing with your auditors?
I don't know. Auditors, when they finish, they do things their own way.
I'm sure when auditors come, they write to the organization and state a specific period within which they are doing the audit.
Yeah, they did, and I think they have not been able to keep to that.
So fascinating encounter, fascinating findings by the Corruption Watch there. Total of 5 million now. Questions about the way that money has been spent. Why is the Zongo Development Fund such an important fund? Remember, for decades, we've had conversations about the Zongos being so underdeveloped. Across the country, go to any Zongo, you will find that the people who reside in Zongos are possibly the poorest. And the challenge with the Zongos is that they are right in the heart of many of our urban centers, and yet they are possibly the poorest you find. And so many governments out over the years of trying to tinker and find ways of dealing with that urban poverty you find within that particular enclave. This Zongo Development Fund is a manifestation of one such solution that this current government had initiated. In fact, they have a minister responsible for this particular sector. And if you look at the law that sets it up, very specific, what it's supposed to do, it's supposed to be, of course, the vehicle for bringing development to the Zongos, for the poor, deprived folks in there. It will pursue realization of objectives including basic services, water, sanitation, strategic infrastructure, financing of education, youth training programs, supporting local businesses, promoting tourism, culture, arts, social protection for the poor and vulnerable. And that is why an area like that definitely requires some scrutiny. We are putting monies to help the poor, the most underprivileged in our society, and these questions are being raised. The CEO admits he's spending way beyond what he's supposed to spend. Does it go to the processes, given contrast to the questionable circumstances? I want to bring in right now those who worked on this. Adam Senanu is co-founder, Citizen Movement Against Corruption, but Gilfred Esiama is research analyst, Center for Democratic Development, Ghana. Of course, you know that the Corruption Watch is funded by, of course, a host of agencies that have come together to do the CDD, the GACC, of course, ASILA had all participated, and the NIDA, of course, funding it as well to make sure that spotlights shine on areas like that. I want to bring in very quickly Gilfred Esiama in particular. Because Gilfred, you've seen the thing. Your colleagues worked on it yourself. We've seen you talking, probing these matters in the clips that we've played already. I am pretty curious. There is a lot of reference to the Public Procurement Authority, right? He admits that he's broken the law, but he writes to the Public Procurement Authority to regularize the breach of the law. Do we know whether the Public Procurement Authority had responded, and what is it that they said? Hello, Mr. Siama.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So the man admitted in the course of the interview that when they sent the request to the Public Procurement Authority, they didn't approve it, and they wanted to follow up and find out whether everything had been done right before they gave the approval. But the man also admitted, or he indicated to us, that the procurement authority didn't take the matter that serious. And that is what he indicated in the course of the interview.
The authority didn't take the matter of the breach of their own regulation seriously. Is that what the story is?
That's what the man actually tried to tell us. And Evans, this is not the first time. If you look at the Kenny DVG and many other incidents that have happened in the past, you realize that people actually breached the law intentionally, as we have seen in this case. The man admitted that he knew he was going to breach the law. He went ahead and breached the law, and then passed by the entity tender committee, which he is the head of the committee, and then went to the Public Procurement Authority for an approval. And we think this is very worrying. The rules are not made for decoration. They are made to restrict some of these discretion by public officials. And if you have public officials who have the tendency to take unguided decisions, go beyond the parameters of the law intentionally, with the motive that after they have committed the offense, they can then go behind and then seek approval from the Public Procurement Authority. And the worry is that this is not the first time. It has happened before. And people think there is that opportunity there for them to exploit, to beat the system and do whatever they like.
I mean, let me bring in Mr. Senator. Mr. Senator, so here's the Public Procurement Authority whose law has been breached. And as we're hearing, they themselves do not seem to see it as a serious infraction. And a breach, I know, comes with specified sanctions. Isn't that why this persists? First of all, what's your reaction to that part of this investigation, that the Public Procurement Authority itself hasn't taken this up seriously?
Well, let me start out by saying that is the opinion of the gentleman in question. And this is a third party, so we cannot assume that he's giving us an accurate reflection of how the Public Procurement Authority actually perceives this issue. So I would not lay much value on his position as articulated, that this is how the Public Procurement Authority takes it. I don't think we should place much value on that.
What would you expect? What would you expect the Public Procurement Authority to do if, of course, based on the findings, the man admits he breached it? What would you have expected the Public Procurement Authority to do when he wrote to them?
Well, the response should have been to quote the law, that this is a breach of the law, and to go through the process, indicate that you were required to have had a procurement plan on which basis you develop this request. If there's a part of it that exceeded your mandate or your threshold, you go to your own entity tender, they put a justification, escalate it to us, etc. So there's no way the Public Procurement Authority could avoid giving a response that details what the requirements are, and then proceeding to investigate the breach and apply the law as is required. And so there's a sense in which we do need to find out from the Public Procurement Authority what has been the response. Because the law is also clear in terms of how you deal with these matters, responding to it. It cannot be that there's just a letter in abeyance. There has to be a response to him detailing what the next steps are, and he cannot avoid an investigation. They cannot just go ahead and say, therefore, we have approved what you did after the fact.
I mean, Mr. Sharma, tell me, so why was this such an important thing to probe? I'm talking about the Zongo Development Fund for you. What triggered the interest in there?
Evans, first of all, when it comes to corruption, hello?
I can hear you, sir.
First of all, when it comes to corruption, it appears most people pay attention when they have seen that people have dipped their hands into a pool of cash, and then they have, pocketed the money, or when they see that people have directly taken money from the state. We usually do not pay much attention to the processes, to the rules of the game, which public officials must follow to make sure that misapplication, misappropriation, and some of these corrupt incidents that we see do not happen. And because most Ghanaians do not pay attention to some of these things, meanwhile, these things are the precedents to corruption. They actually, in a way, facilitate or lead to corruption and misapplication of funds and a whole lot of other things. So these are the things that we think we need to highlight for people to get to know the things that actually lead to corruption, the things that actually facilitate corruption among public officials or in the public sector. Again, we all realize what happened under SADA. First of all, the government has good intentions to help the poor, and they bring some of these wonderful ideas and put money to back some of these ideas. But when it comes to the implementation of those ideas, then we usually come to face the challenges with leaders taking their own decisions, going by their own discretion without walking the rules of the game. So we are also interested in ensuring that some of the pro-poor initiatives being implemented by the government actually benefit the people who the program are being implemented for. So these are two key reasons that we decided to embark on this investigation. And our hope is that at the end of the investigation, we will learn lessons, and the next person in the office will actually walk the rules and make sure that things are done properly.
Let's look at some of the specifics. Let's start with the 200,000 that was awarded. And again, it baffles me why it was done under single source, by the way, because the sort of stuff that the company that won the bid was providing, bottles of sanitizer, face masks, was really, at that time, was a lot of people could have provided that. It begs the question whether in the investigations, whether the question about value for money came up at all in interrogating the chief executive of the Zongo Development Fund. What would you say about that?
I think the man's posture to the questions being raised by the investigator was quite clear. According to the man, it's based on the circumstance. And when people want to go by single source or sole source and some of these restrictive tendering processes, the justification, which even in the law, is sometimes when the situation is urgent. So according to him, he says the thing was urgent, and it's the reason why he decided to go by the sole source or the single source procurement process. But you and I, sitting here, can interrogate and see for ourselves whether it was really, really relevant or necessary for the man to use that approach.
Yeah. I mean, Mr. Senanu, did this merit a single source, sole source approach, supply of bottles of sanitizers and face masks, etc., that cost us, the taxpayer, by the way, 200,000 cedis?
No. As far as I can. No, as far as I'm concerned, it did not merit that. And indeed, when you're put in positions of trust like this, the state and the people we represent expect that you follow process. The argument that the Zongo people needed it and 100,000 wasn't enough does not fly under these circumstances. What you do is you supply what you can and you follow process. You get the additional requirements and you supply them. So the fact that he even did not follow lay down procedure and now is seeking to try and correct it tells you that this is a story really gone bad. You hear him struggling to defend what he did, and it's defenseless. There really wasn't any need to do this.
Yeah, I mean, stay with me. When I return from the break, I'm gonna get into the other issues this raises. I mean, the question about of course, most corruption, in fact, in Ghana, is due to procurement. If you read the Auditor General's report, it's always about procurement. We've created the procurement economy. COVID-19 comes, people are suffering an opportunity to make some money through procurement. 5 million cedis in all that have been spent. We'll interrogate that, but also the question about what should happen now to this particular subject. Is it enough to unearth such damning allegations of potential corruption for the chief executive to admit and still have his job? What about a proper investigation into it? I wonder what the Corruption Watch and CDD plan to do with the findings. Stay with us. Well, if you're just joining us on PMS, we are discussing the uncovering of allegations of corruption at the Zongo Development Fund, a fund that was set up to take care of the poor in Zongo communities across the country. 5 million cedis is in question, including external auditors flagging how the monies were spent. A lot of them raising queries about it, but also we're getting also the chief executive admitting to investigators that he, of course, breached laws governing procurement in awarding contracts on a sole source basis to simply buy bottles of sanitizers and face masks. With me still is Gilfred Isiama, a research analyst, Center for Democratic Development, Ghana, and of course, Mr. Enem Senanu, with an anti-corruption campaigner himself. Now, Mr. Isiama, so I wonder, this probe that you've done, what is it that the CDD intends to do with the findings that you have uncovered?
Well, Evans, the partners, no CDD is made up of partners, and the partners will meet and consider the way forward. As at now, we are considering many options, but I think we have to allow the partners to meet and decide finally what they want to do with this report. I think we haven't even gone to the full extent of the investigations.
I see.
Because there are other issues even in this report which we need to find out. This procurement was approved, or the award of contract, the letter which we have, and it's on the Corruption Watch website. It's dated 25th of March, 2020. And if you look at the company, Focus Women Network, which was awarded this contract, and you go to the list of companies which the Food and Drugs Authority approved somewhere in April, you can't find this company over there. And that is one thing that we also need to avert our minds to and ask questions. How did they get the approval? If what the man is saying is true, how did they get the approval? How qualified is this company whatsoever? And as you said, we will definitely ask more questions even about the propriety of how much the money or how the money was spent, because this man was telling us that the sanitizers that they bought or they purchased from this company, they were told that it's even better and is suited for the use of a five-star hotel. And if you have options and you are using single source, one of the requirements you have to pay attention to is to get the quality, but with a very good price. We don't have the price yet, but the people that you are purchasing even these hand sanitizers for, if you go right now, they are in the market and trying to get the cheapest one, but with a good quality. So we need to ask more questions about this whole saga, which has happened under the watch of the CEO of the Zongo Development Fund. We have other issues that maybe later on we will try and then discuss, even in relation to even the other 4.8 million which was used between 2018 and then 2020. If you look at it, I think one thing that will strike you is the huge amount that is given to consultants. So if you look at the 4.8 million, you can see about 2.8 million allocated for engagement.
You are kidding me, Mr. Siama. We spent more than 2 million cedis to pay consultants for Zongo Development Fund.
So, Evans, that is why I said we think these are issues and queries which have been raised by auditors.
Yeah, I'm just astonished because I introduced by telling my audience what a Zongo Development Fund was set up to do. This is a fund that was set up to bring infrastructure to people, poor folks in Zongos, right? Give them basic amenities, basic services, financing education, youth training programs, very basic stuff that they lack. And we spend more than 2 million cedis. Mr. Senano, let me bring you in on this. More than 2 million cedis paying consultants to do exactly what?
Outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. And Evans, I mean, I wish that the citizens in that area, in the Zongos who are supposed to benefit from this, will themselves begin to understand how come we are not getting the results they deserve when we set up these funds. It's just outrageous, absolutely outrageous. I mean, first of all, I asked myself, do we cross-check the backgrounds of the people we are appointing to these positions? Because it's almost as if he has absolutely no clue about how procurement should be done, what is acceptable, what can be taken on board and not taken on board. And he seems to think that you can just correct it. I think these are red flags that it is very important that Corruption Watch is raising, because we already had SADA. If somebody does not begin to act now, how much more are we going to lose as a nation because we just put the wrong person?
I think we may have lost Mr. Sanano. Mr. Sanano, the line of yours is on holding. Hopefully he can. He's making such an important point. I'm hoping that somehow... Okay, Mr. Sanano, you're back. You finish your point because I lost you briefly with the line. I think you've put it on mute if you can unmute it. We just lost you briefly, but the connection wasn't great. But you could speak now.
Okay. I was saying that it is very crucial that Corruption Watch is highlighting these issues at this point. Because we've already had a SADA where trees that were supposed to be planted never were planted. We lost so much money. It is sad to think that in the same organization, barely within a 4-year period, we are beginning to see the makings of another huge scandal. Yes, under normal circumstances, there should be a management response to the auditing that is taking place. So maybe there's a sense in which we need to wait a little. But I think that if auditors are raising questions and we can already find that somebody goes beyond his entity tender committee and is going to public procurement to try and correct a major gap like this, the government ought to be stepping in to act. And it does not take away the fact that investigations and sanctions and prosecutions must also follow.
Now, another thing that fascinated me when I listened to his interview, he says the sanitizers they bought, they were told that it's so good that it's fit for a 5-star hotel. And I'm thinking to myself, it's a sanitizer, for crying out loud. All you need is 70% alcohol. I mean, the formula is so known. I mean, what does a 5-star hotel sanitizer look like? Is it better? Goodness me. I mean, what's your reaction? That really caught me.
I started laughing as soon as I heard that. I mean, my first degree is in science. I don't know what you did, but you just hit the nail on the head. It's all about 70% alcohol. In fact, I go to places where after I've washed my hands, they attempt to give me the hand sanitizer. I say, you know what? The soap is much more effective than even the 70%. So if I've used soap to wash my hands, if you're a scientist, you understand that you don't go and dilute it with the 70% alcohol. But for God and country, what does somebody mean by saying it's good for a 5-star hotel? In any case, I think that when we do single source procurement, if I'm right, it is that you're providing a product or service that nobody else, immediately available, provides that kind of. So there must be something extremely unique about that product or service, for which reason we are going single source. So, I mean, the context for which this whole thing comes up, that's not even arise. There's really no justification. 70% alcohol sanitizer is good for 5-star hotels. I don't know. I think this is just ridiculous.
And that was the reason why they chose sole source, because the person who was supplying it is the only person in Ghana, presumably, who could supply sanitizers fit for 5-star hotels in Ghana. Amazing. So wrap up for me in 30 seconds. What do you expect to happen now on the back of these revelations?
I think that if the presidency is up to its game, you should remove this guy immediately, indicate that the investigative bodies should quickly complete their investigations, submit reports for which the necessary sanctions. If he's cleared, fine. If he's not, the law should follow its course, and that should be done quickly. We send a bad impression when these things come up, media flags it, and no actions are taken. It probably is the reason why in the same institution, in a very short time, we are having a similar event.
I'm grateful.
Robust action from the presidency.
Okay, I'm grateful. That's Adam Senano. Also, you've heard Gilfred Esiama, who's a research analyst for Democratic Development. They put this investigation together. We are keeping an eye on this. And CDD had just told us that there's more that they still haven't told you yet. And so keep this space and watch it very closely. My name is Evan Spencer. Enjoy the rest of your evening.